Hey squad, welcome back. Now, if you're producing music using digital audio workstations such as Logic Pro X and others, you have a fantastic range of tools at your disposal. And one of the most powerful tools you have access to is the range of sampling facilities right here in Logic Pro. Now, when I started out producing way back in the mid to late 80s, sampling came at a huge premium. You were paying thousands of dollars or pounds for just a few seconds of sampling time. And these hardware devices were not only expensive, they were very complicated to work with very tiny displays. In fact, I still own one of the most horrible samplers ever developed, the Akai S2000. However, at the time, it was an absolute dream because it allowed me to capture samples, manipulate them, and spin them back into my production. Now, if you have been using Logic Pro X, just like me for several years, the EXS24 has been a very powerful sampler for at least 2 decades, built right into Logic, and it's enabled us to be able to manipulate samples directly within our DAW, and importantly, we've had access to a big display to be able to edit parameters. Now, in the release of Logic 10.5, Apple launched a new wave of samplers for Logic, and these have been absolutely fantastic and taken sampling in Logic to a brand new level. Now, if your only sampling option in Logic is the EXS24, then you really are missing out, because this new range of sampling tools, which we're going to cover today, are an absolute must in terms of saving time, efficiency, and just power. So that's the plan for today. I have done videos on the new Logic samplers, so make sure you check those out. But also, if you're finding value in these videos, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you're moved to do so, it would be lovely to have your support in the form of a donation. Anyway, it's that time, so let's get into it. Okay, so sampling in Logic. Now, before we actually explore all of the options in Logic, I just want to break it down to those of you who aren't that familiar with sampling. The reality is, if you've been using Logic or any other DAW to record audio, to trim down your audio and select sections for use, you're already doing the major portion of the sampling process. Now let's take, for example, this drum loop right here. Okay, now what if I wanted to isolate this snare clap sound right here? This loop is the source of my sample. I come like so, and now this here is a sample taken from the main loop. And that's what sampling is. It's selecting a specific portion of an original recording and then using that and repurposing it into your production. Now I can pull this sample into my sampling playback processing software instrument to manipulate it and use it in my production. Okay, so I hope you understand that. Now, to demonstrate the different tools in Logic for sampling, I'm going to be using this sample right here, which I've taken from this source up here, this song right here. Now, of course, I can't play back the original song because I want to avoid a copyright strike. It's one of my favorite songs from back in the day. It's an old school R&B song, but you might well be able to recognize the sample when I play it back right here. So all I've done essentially is I've gone into here, I've found a section of the song, and I've chopped it out, and I'm going to be importing this sample right here into Logic's sample player tools. So let me just play back the sample, and to further protect my channel from getting a strike, I've layered the sample with some drums right here. So let's play that back. Okay, so before we actually start using this sample right here, let me demonstrate with this bass sample I've got down here. Have a listen. Okay, it's just a single one-shot bass note, and I know this bass note is pitched at G sharp. Okay, so let's grab this, and if we pull this over here, we can create a new track with this bass sample and add it to one of these 7 options. We've got the Quick Sampler Original, Quick Sampler Optimized, Drum Machine Designer, 3 Alchemy sampler options, and then of course the main Logic sampler, which allows you to do multi-sampling, which we'll get to. However, let's start with Quick Sampler Original. Okay, here's our bass sample. If I was to play this back, Logic has simply imported the bass sample into the quick sampler, and although the pitch of this sample is set to G sharp, just like any traditional sampler will do, the sample has been plonked onto C3 as the root. So if I played C3 on my keyboard, I'm playing back the sample, however the pitch of the sample is actually G sharp. So if I wanted the sample to be assigned to the correct pitch, I just need to click here and pull this back to G sharp. And now I'm playing G sharp on my keyboard, and that's the correct root position for the sample. Now let's try a second option. If I was to come back here, grab the bass sample, come back into here, and this time use Quick Sampler Optimized, let's see what happens. As you can see, Logic has now analyzed the sample and determined that the root should be G sharp 2. Now if I press G sharp 2 on my MIDI keyboard, which is the same as the original sample, now this is a very handy feature, especially if you don't know what the root note of the sample is. Logic will automatically analyze and place the sample on the right note or right key and map that across the keyboard. That way your samples are going to be in tune with your overall production. This time we're going to import our sample loop, which we grabbed from the old school R&B track, and we're going to drop that into the quick sampler, and we're going to use the optimized option. So here's our sample waveform in the display, and as you can see, it's been split up into slices, and the position of each of these slices is determined by transient information. So if I was to press here, that's the length of that sample, and then this one. Let me go to my MIDI keyboard. And these are all micro samples which you can use in your productions if you want to add interesting textures to your production vibe. Now make sure you watch my video on the quick sampler where I go further in depth on how this thing works. But for now, what I'm going to do is reduce the sensitivity of this by dragging this slider down, and let's see what we get now. Okay, I can then go in and maybe remove some of these slices. Let's try that. So let me go away and make some adjustments to these slices, and I'll come back and show you how I'll be able to implement this in my production. Okay, so I've reduced the sensitivity even further and deleted some more of the slices to allow me longer passages such as this. Okay, and now I'm going to use my MIDI keyboard to trigger different slices at different intervals to create a new sample loop. Also over here, you'll notice on the channel strip, I've inserted a velocity processor in the MIDI slot, and I've set this to maximum velocity. Now what will happen is, it doesn't matter how hard or soft I hit my notes on the keyboard, every note will be triggered at maximum velocity. Okay, so let me demonstrate how I'm going to create a new vibe using these sample chops. Okay, now that I've got this new pattern made up of those sample chops, I can go ahead and do a ton of things. I can manipulate things further in here within the sampler. I can also add audio effects and processors to the track, and then continue to layer this with additional things such as drums, keyboards, bass, and so on. Having this at the heart of the production, but adding more elements to create a song. Okay, so for the next sampling option, we're going to use these 2 bars of this drum loop. Let me just play that back real quick. Okay, we're going to grab this. Once again, we're going to pull it down here, and this time we're going to drop it into the Drum Machine Designer. Okay, and here's our new window. And if we were to click on any of these, You'll see the waveform down here in the display showing the original audio that we've pulled in. And we can click through and listen to all of the individual hits. And what Logic has done is gone through and isolated each of the hits and assigned them to individual cells in the Drum Machine Designer. So, okay. And all of these are now accessible via your MIDI keyboard. And now what I can do is use these individual drums in my production. So if I was to loop around my sample chop region, let's quantize that. Yeah, it's quick and dirty, but you get the idea. And of course, you can check out my video on the Drum Machine Designer, in which I go further in depth on how to use this fantastic tool. So for those of you guys who are more interested in sound design, let's grab our sample again and come over like so. And this time we're going to drop it onto the Alchemy additive. And now our sample has been pulled into Alchemy. So let's play that back. Now the sample has been loaded into slot 1 in Alchemy, and you have access to all of the parameters within Alchemy to alter and manipulate the tone of the sample. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is up to you and your creativity and how you might want to explore the options in Alchemy. But what we'll do is now we'll go back to our main sample, and this time we're going to go to granular. And let's have a quick listen. Once again, I'm just going to demonstrate the third one, and this time spectral. Okay, like I said, there's so much you can do in Alchemy in terms of manipulating the sample and layering it with additional waveforms and possibly even additional samples. But I'll leave that to you to explore and experiment with, because that can take us down a very deep rabbit hole and we haven't got time for it. So let's just move to the last option. And this time we're going to grab 4 bars of the drum loop and come down here, and we're going to drop it onto Sampler. And this is Logic's main sampler software instrument. It's a fantastic, very powerful tool. And once again, check out my video, which goes into more depth on how you can take advantage of the power and resources in this. As you can see, the sample has been routed at C3. And if I play back at C1, you can tell the pitch is lower and the sample plays back a lot slower. What we can do is come right here and select the flex option. Now if I play back at C1, the pitch drops down, but the tempo stays the same. G2. Again, C3. So the flex option automatically time stretches the sample. So no matter what note you hit on the keyboard, the sample will always stay in time. Now, one final thing I want to show you is how you can make use of the group feature in the Logic sampler to layer samples on top of each other. So this section here is called the zone section. And what we've got is this single sample stretched across every single zone in the sampler right now. Okay, we could change the range by going here and reducing the number of zones the sample occupies, but the maximum range is being used. Now here is the group section, and in this group we have got our drums. However, what I want to do is introduce a new sample and layer it on top. So what I'm going to do is grab this hi-hat, drag and drop here. And now we have a new group with our sample right here. Okay, let's rename this hi-hats. And currently the root key for this sample is C1. Let's set that to C3. And the range I want to spread across the entire keyboard as well. So if I was to come back here and just solo the hats, and as you can tell, the lower down the keyboard I go, the lower the pitch and the slower the speed. So once again, what we're going to do is switch on the flex option. And now, okay, which is what we're looking for. We want to time stretch this. Play that back so you can hear how the hats actually sound. Okay, and now I'm going to solo just the drums so you can hear how the drums sound. And now we're going to hear them both together layered on top of each other. Now that's a really quick example of how you can layer different samples on top of each other within the Logic Sampler. There's tons more I can show you. There's tons more you can do. Now, hopefully I've been able to give you a quick overview as to what the different sampler options are in Logic and how you might be able to take advantage of these in your creative process. As always, don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I'm Deuce. I'm out. Peace.